Hello and welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
the
FAIRtax Guys. And oh, mercy, this is going to be another fun day.
Yeah.
We have another special Ron theme show. You come up with these little goodies every now and then.
Well, we are going to help the current president-elect by talking about how to drain the swamp, at least one portion of it in D.C.
Yeah, there's quite a good bit of it up there that needs draining.
Yeah, because it's one thing to change your elected officials. We have the opportunity to do that every 2 years, or with the Senate every 6 years, with the president every 4 years, and so forth. But it's the other people, the unelected officials. They seem to stay there forever, and they believe they believe themselves to be impervious to these changes.
All right.
So
before we get into that too deep, let's remind everybody how they can get in touch with us. The FAIRtax Guys at gmail.com. Or you can go to our Facebook page, the FAIRtax Guys there on Facebook, and leave us a comment or whatever, and we'd sure love to hear from you. So
yes, please do. Yep.
All right, now let's get to pulling the plug here and figuring out why the fair tax can help do that. I mean, we got to stay on topic here.
Well, yeah, and first we're going to talk about some of the problems that we currently have and why we need to drain the swamp up there. All right, this one is from...
I would think getting rid of the IRS would be kind of right at the top of that list.
Well, yeah. And, that's very popular when we go to events, outdoor events where we're talking to people about the fair tax. When you say it's going to eliminate the IRS, people's ears perk up, believe me.
But other people say that their plans will eliminate the IRS, but they won't.
No.
Because the IRS, by definition, a federal agency that is charged with administering a federal income tax code. As long as there is a federal income tax, there must be a federal agency to enforce and administer it. So changing the income tax from something to something else, but it's still an income tax, does not, cannot, and will not ever get rid of the IRS. To get rid of the IRS, you must get rid of the income tax itself, and the only proposal that does that is the fair tax. Your turn.
Yep. And Bob is right, because the plan proposed by Speaker Ryan, called A Better Way.
Yeah, we've talked on that for the past couple episodes.
Yeah,
it's good, but it's not the best way.
And it says it's going to make the IRS much more friendly. Come on, give me a break. Nobody believes that.
Let's make the IRS go away instead.
Yeah, that would be the best way. That would be the most friendly way. Anyways, this one, IRS told to crack down on non-filers. You think?
Oh, you think we have an evasion problem?
It's from CPA Practice Advisor. The IRS is known for chasing down tax cheats, but now a new report from the Treasurer Inspector General for Tax Administration, the arm of the Treasury Department with oversight of the nation's tax collection agency, says the IRS has to do a better job of corralling non-filers. Well, yeah, I hope so, because the rest of us have to pony up for everything that they're not paying.
Yeah.
But listen to this. This is the last sentence here. Typically, the IRS will issue delinquency notices to more than 640,000 non-filers with expired extensions each year. 640,000.
Why do we have a system that is dependent upon people filing in the first place?
Yeah, we need to make it simple and automatic.
Let's have a system where the tax is collected, let's say at the cash register when you buy things.
Yep.
You don't have to file for that. You can't evade it. It's much more efficient to collect. Fair tax beats the income tax by a country mile.
And many of you live in states that have a sales tax, a state sales tax. It's very simple. Do you ever hear any nonsense about problems with the state sales tax, people evading it? How the heck do you evade it? Like I said in another episode, if you don't want to pay the sales tax on something, don't buy the item.
Yeah, but individuals don't evade the sales tax hardly. I mean, of course, there may be some black market things, and I imagine there's some vendors on eBay where you buy stuff online that doesn't have the sales tax attached to it. But largely, the enforcement is going to be at the state level with a huge number of box stores like Walmart and Target and Kmart and places like that. Yeah. But you have an interesting little graphic here that I was looking over. It says, and I'm not sure exactly what this refers to, but it says in the past 15 years, 9 states with no income tax gained $146 billion. States with the highest income tax lost $106 billion. Now, I'm not sure what that refers to, if that's their state budget.
I believe it's tax revenue. I think it's tax revenue.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they have a little map. They have, the states that gain the revenue, they have them in green. Florida, Texas, Tennessee, South Dakota, and so on. There's 9 of them.
We're lucky to live in one of those little green states, aren't we?
Yep. And then they have the 9 states with the highest income tax: California, New York, Oregon, Maine, Vermont, and so forth. Iowa, some of those. So
let's get rid of the income tax and make everybody a winner.
Yeah, that's a case for, yes, the fair tax will work because it currently is working in these states. And I know for a fact that one of the reasons it's working here in Florida is because a lot of people in New York are moving to Florida. New York State is losing taxpayers and we're gaining them.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at someone who did just that.
Yeah, yep, 20 years now. And every time I find out what's going on up in New York, I'm very glad I moved to Florida.
Okay, let's drain the swamp that is the IRS by getting rid of it.
Yep, here's another one. The definition of insanity. The IRS private debt collectors. Okay, this is from Accounting Today, and it was just a few weeks ago. We have all heard that the definition of insanity is to repeatedly do the same thing, expecting different results. Using that definition, U.S. Congress can now be considered officially insane.
I think we've known that for a while.
7 years after it after it proved to be a disaster, the use of outside debt collectors has again been approved by Congress for use by the IRS. You may ask yourself, haven't we been here before? Yeah, and it goes on to say how they had this program back in 2006 where they were using outside collecting agencies to try to collect your taxes. And, of course, they used some very aggressive methods. You'd think the IRS is bad because they had an incentive. They got to keep 25% of what they collected. So they really went after you. Well, that proved to be a disaster, so Congress suspended the program. So what are they doing? In December of 2015, the president signed into law the FAST Act. The bill known as it was part of a highway bill, but it also included a requirement for the IRS to use private agencies to collect tax debts.
What does that have to do with highways? Isn't that disgusting the way the Congress will make it just a hodgepodge? You'll get a highway bill, or you'll get an infrastructure bill, or you'll get something, and so much irrelevant junk pork is shoved into it.
But why, if they already tried this and it failed, why would they do it again? I guess they think that, well, that Congress didn't do it right, and we're going to do it right. It's going to fail.
Let's get rid of the agency that does stupid things like that.
Actually, maybe it won't fail. Maybe we're going to make it a completely moot point and get rid of the income tax altogether. What
Absolutely.
do you say, Bob?
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah. And this is very short. Small Business Administration urges IRS rethinking. The IRS is underestimating the effect of new estate and gift tax rules, the effect that they could have on small businesses across the country. The Small Business Administration warned. Now, here's my point. It's rules enacted by the IRS without Congress. Where's the people's input? Where's our representation? The IRS changed these rules on collecting estate and gift tax. What part did Congress play with this? No, this is part of what I'm talking about with draining the swamp. We've got this tremendous bureaucracy, not just the IRS, the EPA, the Interior Department, Department of Education, and Congress has authorized them to make these rules on their own. There's no input from the people. Yeah. There's no voting on it. They just do it.
Yeah, you've heard us mention several times about the tax code being 75,000 plus pages, and it has been brought to our attention more than once that the actual tax code itself is not quite that bad. But when you add up the tax code, the legislation, the statutes, plus all of the associated regulations, plus all of the associated case law where people take the IRS to court or the IRS takes people to court, and a court decision renders some kind of decision on an item, and however way the court decides it becomes the way that is treated in the future and becomes, has the force of law. So that's all that stuff is what adds up to 74,000 pages that need to be drained down to about 133.
And you and I are responsible for every word of it. Every word, something like 10 or 11 million words in there, in that tax code. Because when, like Bob says, when they have a court case that and the courts decide on a particular aspect of the code, and the court may change it, they don't go back to where that was originally written in and change the language. No, they just make an addendum. So the only way you know that a change was made is by reading the entire code. Ay, ay, ay. So it's untenable. I mean, you just can't do it.
But I tell you, of all of the swamp creatures that I want to get rid of, lobbyists are at the top of the list.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, mercy. We'll hit on that in a second.
Yep. So how many laws does Congress enact? I spent quite a bit of time on the computer a couple days ago trying to figure out, because what I was getting to was how many laws does Congress enact and how many rules that have the force of law does the regulatory agencies, such as the IRS, create. So this one says the House of Representatives and the Senate have enacted an average of 282 laws a year over a 40-year period from 73 to 2012. So over a 40-year period, Congress has been enacting about 282
and I would guess,
laws per year.
I would guess that regulations proliferate at about 10 times that rate.
Yeah, well, get this sentence. It says, this amounts to about 4% of all legislation introduced.
Wow.
By the members of Congress. So, and I did look that up, and Congressman Yoho mentioned this in one of the interviews we did with him. He said of all the laws that are enacted, and I thought he misspoke because he said something like about 10,000. He did not. There are about 10,000 bills introduced to the House and the Senate every year, and about 300 of them get enacted into law. Well, that's bad enough, okay? That's what Congress does. And that's why, Mr. Yoho was saying, I know people have a bad opinion of us, but we're really busy up there in Congress because we got all this legislation swirling around us like a tornado.
But getting back, I wonder how much of that is inspired by lobbyists wanting things.
Oh, gotta be. Yeah. It's got to be, because you figured out. Well, let's see. We in one of our episodes, I think we said that a figure that I was given. There's like 12,000 lobbyists in Washington, and that's about 22 for each congressman and senator.
Oh, mercy! And most of them are lobbying for tax favors.
Yeah, that's right. The vast
and if
majority.
we want to get rid of them, we have to get rid of the tax code that they're trying to monkey with.
Yeah.
So the fair tax will help drain the swamp.
Okay, this is from the Library of Congress blog. Frequent reference questions. How many federal laws are there? Well, again, it goes at the reference desk. We are frequently asked to estimate the number of laws in force. If you think of the answer to this question can be found in the volumes of Statutes at Large, you are partially correct. And then it goes on, Statutes at Large. Of course, this is what a librarian in the Congress Library has. A book that who knows how big it is, how many volumes there are. But that does not include case law or regulatory provisions. Case law and regulatory provisions, that's what we've been talking about. All right? Congress creates a change to the tax law, then the bureaucrats, they create the regulatory provisions, how it's actually spelled out, how you're going to comply with it. And then there's court cases.
Yeah, and then somebody takes that to court. The court decides something different, so they go back and write some more regulatory stuff.
So to answer this is not easy because there was, it says, in an example of a failed attempt to tally up the number of laws on a specific subject area, 1982, the Justice Department tried to determine the total number of criminal laws. In a project that lasted 2 years, the department compiled a list of approximately 3,000 criminal offenses. However, this effort came as a long a part of a long and ultimately failed campaign to persuade Congress to revise their criminal code. In other words, they never could get a handle on it. They tried a 2-year program, and they couldn't get a real handle on the laws. Finally, I found a website that gave me the answer to what I wanted. All right. This is from the Congressional Research Service, and it's dated October of this year. Federal rulemaking is an important mechanism through which the federal government implements policy. Rulemaking, all right? Rulemaking is by the bureaucrats, not by Congress. Federal agencies issue regulations pursuant to statutory authority granted them by Congress. Therefore, Congress may have an interest in performing oversight of those regulations, and measuring federal regulatory activity may be a useful way for Congress to conduct that oversight. The number of federal rules issued annually and the total number of pages in the Federal Register are often referred to as measures of the total federal regulatory burden. And I emphasize the word burden because they are a burden on us and the corporations. Anyways, to sum it up, the number of final rules published each year is generally in the range of 2,500 to 4,500. Get that? 2,500 to 4. Let's say 3,000. Let's say an average of 3,000 rules that have the force of law that we are all responsible for every year. That's just in 1 year, according to the Office of the Federal Register.
Now, hang on a second. I got my trusty calculator here. 3,000 a year is almost 8.5 a day. Eight of them a day.
And that's what the regular, the people in the IRS, the EPA, the Interior Department, and so forth, all these folks, they write these rules, and then there's also court cases, and we are responsible for all of that. So when the incoming administration says something cute and catchy, like they want to drain the swamp, they got their work cut out for them, don't they?
There's a lot of swamp critters up there. We have got a culture up there. I think it would just absolutely, of course, it would horrify the founding fathers to see what the federal government has morphed into, how much power they have usurped from the states, and how much power they try to exert over individual lives and are running roughshod over the Bill of Rights in the process if you're the IRS.
That's right.
And so let's start. If we're going to start draining the swamp, let's don't drain around the edges. Let's go right to the middle of the pond and pull the plug and get rid of this nasty monstrosity called the income tax.
Yeah, and these regulations, they have a cost. They're a drain on the economy. They're difficult to comply with. I mean, maybe not many of them apply to our day-to-day activities, but they do apply to the corporations from whom we buy our products and services. The cost of bureaucratic regulations since 1980, $4 trillion. Let me repeat that. The cost of bureaucratic regulations since 1980, $4 trillion with a T, $4 trillion.
Now, if we could take that money and start to pay down the national debt, just thinking.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. And talk about unleashing the economy. You get this burden, you get this weight off of their back by simplifying this stuff. So here's my thought for the incoming administration, the Trump administration, to drain the swamp. If you implement the fair tax, and remember, we've got Mr. Trump surrounded by all kinds of fair tax people, but we still have our due diligence here. If the new administration were to entertain and promote and pass the fair tax, well, then one of the aspects of the fair tax is that it must be accompanied by the repeal of the 16th Amendment. Has to happen. You can't let Congress have both an income tax and a consumption tax because we know they can't control themselves. So the 16th Amendment must be repealed. Well, if you repeal the 16th Amendment and you don't have an income tax, you won't need the IRS. The IRS has to go away. Now, if the incoming administration wants to be serious about changing all these regulations and so forth, wants to be serious about draining the swamp, it's not just the elected people, it's the unelected bureaucrats that they're going to have to influence. And if, agencies like the EPA and the Interior Department and some of these agencies, if they suddenly see legislation that has eliminated one huge bureaucracy known as the IRS, they might tend to fall in line. Don't you think?
I would think so. Now, let's go ahead and define the second what we're talking about. Draining the swamp is a neat little sounding metaphor.
Yeah.
But what we're really talking about, hopefully anyway, is changing the culture.
Yeah.
Up there. Changing the culture of the political elite that just think they're entitled to rule over us. Changing the culture of the political elite that are getting their palms greased by lobbyists day in, day out, and just selling the American people down the river. And nobody does that better than the IRS.
Yeah, that's right. Bob is absolutely right. And to illustrate this, let's go back to an example that we've used before. Civil asset forfeiture. Civil asset forfeiture. Go to YouTube and look up Carol Hinders. It's like a 2-minute video. Carol Hinders. She's this grandmotherly type person. I can't remember if it was Iowa or Idaho or anyways. And she runs this little cash-only Mexican restaurant. Has been doing it for almost 40 years. Suddenly, she gets informed by the IRS that they have seized her bank account, like $33,000. That's the money that she used to buy supplies and so forth to keep her restaurant going. So why did they do this? Was she like Al Capone under the, in
Rico
hiding?
Act there?
Ma Barker or something like this? No. It's because it's a cash-only business. So she makes cash deposits. Now, she's been dealing with this one bank for like 30 years. Never had a problem. But then that bank got bought out by a bigger organization. And there is a rule, there is a kind of a situation between banks and the IRS. If a teller sees that somebody is making these small cash deposits, $2,000-$3,000 each day or something like that, or every week, they may be trying to escape the law. There is a law that says if you deposit $10,000 or more, you have to report it to the IRS. And that law is there for a good reason. It's to try to catch criminals.
Try to get drug dealers. That do it in
drug
cash.
dealers and so forth. People doing unscrupulous things. I have no problem with that. But then the IRS says, if this person deposited $5,000 on this date, and then a couple days later deposited another $5,000, he's trying to escape the $10,000 rule. That's called structuring. We're going to shut him down. So they seize the bank account without accusing them of anything. So there's, think of the Bill of Rights that are violated here, that the IRS does routinely.
Yes, doesn't the Bill of Rights grant you the presumption of innocence until you've not only been charged with something, but actually been convicted of that charge in a court of law?
Yeah, and and the Bill of Rights also
IRS
says
doesn't care about that.
No, the IRS has carte blanche to just go and kind of do that. So in this lady's situation, like Bob said, she's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, while with the IRS it's just the opposite. You're guilty and you have to prove yourself innocent, which means you have to come up with some money to go to court.
Sounds like there's some alligators in that swamp we need to get rid of.
Jeez. And then protection against unreasonable search and seizure. Well, that one was out the window too, wasn't it? When they seized her bank account. All right. The right to a trial by a jury of your peers. Well, that was out the window because she's got to prove herself innocent with the IRS. No jury involved, unless she sues them. But if they just seized her meager $33,000 may be a lot to an individual, but for a business, when you're trying to run a business and every day you have to buy supplies, you have to keep those supplies coming into your restaurant so that you don't run out of stuff. Okay. So that's an example of bureaucratic abuse that has created a swamp-like atmosphere in Washington. The IRS, these individuals are not responsible to anybody. I mean, this particular lady got a help from an organization, and they went after the IRS, and they got her. But how long was she without that money, and how did she struggle to keep her restaurant open, to keep her livelihood going? When she did absolutely nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing wrong. All right? But the IRS seized her bank account anyways. That's just a small example of the swamp-like atmosphere up in Washington.
Yeah, and there's a lot of swampland up there. You're not going to drain it overnight. It's probably not going to drain it over the course of a year. But I tell you what, getting rid of the Internal Revenue Service has got to be one of the biggest plugs you can pull if we're going to clean up this culture of mess that's up there in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So, and again, we've hit on this before. The only way you're going to get rid of the IRS is to get rid of the income tax that the IRS is charged with administering and enforcing. As long as there's a federal income tax, there will be an IRS. It may have a different name, but there will be a federal agency. That's what they'll do. We'll get rid of the IRS. We'll change it to something else.
This is a family show, Bob.
I know. I didn't say it, but I thought it. But anyhow, to get rid of federal tax enforcement. Get rid of tax enforcement and administration at the federal level. You turn it over to the states, which the FAIRtax does. You get rid of the IRS. Any other proposal is going to keep, if not the IRS by name, a similar agency with a similar scope and charge.
Yeah. If you have a tax on your income, on your hard work and your productivity, people are naturally going to try to reduce whatever's possible. Now, again, we've talked about this before. If you're using the law and you're legally avoiding taxes, that's one thing. If you're evading taxes, you're breaking the law, and then you run the risk of getting your tookie in the squisher. So you don't want to do that. So
No.
Get rid of the income tax, replace it with a simple sales tax. Everybody's lives will be a lot easier.
Oh yeah, but it's going to take some effort. How do we get that done?
Well, we really encourage people to join us with the Americans for Fair Taxation. That's our national group. Whatever state you're in, there's probably a state and local group of Fair Tax volunteers. Contact them, and you can do that by going to fairtax.org. Fairtax.org. You can get a lot more information. All right. Of course, Bob and I are giving you all kinds of information if you listen to Fairtax Power Radio every week. But if you have a question that we haven't addressed, fairtax.org will probably have a bunch of frequently asked questions. And the other one is bigsolution.org. Please go to bigsolution.org. Connect, support, contribute, and build. We've talked about this before. That's where you can get involved and make it happen. And this is not going to happen unless you get involved. I mean, everyday citizens, not fair tax volunteers, must insist of their Congress critters that they co-sponsor the fair tax. You must insist. You got to be adamant about it. Of course, you need to learn about it first so you can talk intelligently about the fair tax. So learn about it and then hammer your Congress people, your congressmen and your two senators.
Yeah, don't settle for a small solution to a big problem.
That's right.
And don't let them sell you a better way when there is a best way.
That's right. The fair tax is the best way, and it's better than Mr. Ryan's plan. There's no two ways around it. Okay, if you want to buy some gear, a FAIRtax hat or a shirt or something, FairtaxLogoStore.org, FairtaxLogoStore.org. You can do that. And FairtaxRewards.com. We've talked about that. I'm running out of time now, but you can do your shopping through FairtaxRewards.com. Take a look at that. And don't forget the webinar that is normally the fourth Thursday of the month. Go to fairtax.org/webinar and sign up for the next one.
Yeah, they may be changing that around for the holiday schedule. We're recording this in November.
Yep.
But check it out, and they'll tell you when the next one is, what it's going to be, what question.
By the way, we forgot to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving.
So yes.
This episode will play the day after Thanksgiving.
Okay, let's do that.
Happy Thanksgiving, folks.
Okay, indeed. Thank you so much. And please get in touch with us here at the FairtaxGuys@gmail.com or on our Facebook page. We would love to hear from you. And until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
We are the FairTax Guys, reminding you that the fair tax is America's big solution. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
FairTax